Okay, here she is. Give her a very warm applause. Edina!
Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Edina, and I'm a scientist. So I've spent the past 4 decades of my life trying to find an answer to one single research question. And this question is, why don't women have a sense of humor? So humor is a 2-dimensional personality construct. It's true. It's very difficult to do stand-up comedy in high heels. I didn't expect this. This is totally new to me. So I have to take them off. I'm sorry about this. It's much better now. Okay, so humor is a 2-dimensional personality construct. One dimension is whether a person is able to make other people laugh, and the other dimension is whether a person is able to laugh. Now, recent research from the area of human ethology suggests that women are able to laugh. You see? There too? Yeah, really good. But however, to date, according to my literature review, there is no scientific evidence that would prove that women are able to make other people laugh. Even though there was a study recently published in the Journal of Nonsense, and in this study, researchers have reported of a female participant in an experiment that nearly made an independent jury smile. However, the relationship was just marginally significant. So this is an enormous gap in scientific literature, and I have dedicated the past 8 decades of my life trying to find an answer to these questions. So, in our first study, we tried to find out what are the biological reasons for this humor gap between the sexes. So we did an MRI study in which we compared the brain of men and women. So the male brain was donated by an Eastern European student for this study who had great difficulties paying his tuition fees. However, we had much more difficulties in acquiring a female brain for our study. In the end, luckily, we managed to retrieve one from a volunteer who often signed up to experiments in our study. So this volunteer, I still remember her. I remember her name too. Her name was Matilda. She was this very nice elderly lady. She had long, gray, soft hair, and she smelled a bit funny. And Matilda later on turned out to be a mouse. But don't get me wrong, and you should be assured about the ecological validity of our findings, because in every other way, she was just an average woman like any of us here. Okay, so first I have to just tell you a bit about where humor is located in the human brain. So, there is this part of the human brain that is called the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe is like an earlobe, it's just much more temporal. So, what we found in this study was that the temporal lobe of men is 300 times bigger than the temporal lobe of women. 300 times. Just think about it, let this sink in. This means that the average man is 300 times funnier than the average woman. And we have scientifically proven this. Now, there were some naysayers, there were some researchers who doubted the validity of our findings on a racial basis. They suggested that they questioned the validity on the basis that we cannot compare the brain of a human male and a rodent female. And you know, people who know me know that I'm always open to criticism about my research. Always. But I must say that I was also flabbergasted by the prevalence of racism in today's academia. Okay, so in the next study, in our follow-up study, we try to find an answer to the question, why are female stand-up comedians much less funny than normal stand-up comedians? Apart from their underdeveloped temporal lobe, of course. So what we found was that female stand-up comedians tend to choose their topics very poorly. So while normal stand-up comedians often focus on topics that concern everyone equally, for example, itchy testicles or eating pussy. At the same time, female stand-up comedians tend to focus on women's issues. You know, these very narrow topics that only concern this negligible minority of the human population. So, for example, parenthood, or relationships, or climate change. What are you gonna do? And the reason for this, I believe, is that almost all female stand-up comedians today are women. This is true, this is statistics. And this is also the result of positive discrimination and affirmative action in the entertainment industry that disadvantages men who aspire to be female comedians. According to the data we gathered, every single female stand-up comedian was either a woman or a lesbian or a lesbian woman. We could not identify one single lesbian man among the entire population of female stand-up comedians. And this is just the proof that reverse sexism is alive and kicking in the entertainment industry today. Okay, so, but there are some researchers, however, they call themselves social constructionists. So these people, they suggest that there are no such differences between the sexes, and men are not funnier than women. And all of this is just social perception. So people tend to perceive men to be funnier than women, and this is just another manifestation of structural inequalities between the sexes. But this is obviously not true. Women today can vote. And they are not only allowed to do all the paid work that men are allowed to do, but on top of the paid work, they are also allowed to do all the unpaid housework that men today are still excluded from and can only dream of. Which suggests that women today do not have as much, but even more opportunities than men do. And the living proof for equal opportunities between men and women in the comedy industry today is female stand-up comedian Amy Schumer. Do you know her? Yeah? This big woman. Yeah? Okay, just think about her. Picture her. I wouldn't want to fuck her. And still, she made it to the 100 funniest people of the world list of the New York Times in 2018. As the only female stand-up comedian. This is as if, for the sake of political correctness, Manchester United would include an overweight woman to play in the finals of the Champions League. mean, what is that? Okay. But I did not want to offend anyone here tonight, and I hope I didn't. I just did not want to shy away either from talking about the truth for the sake of political correctness. As Jordan Peterson, the famous lesbian man, once said, the current hierarchy between men and women today is predicated on competence. In other words, this means that the humor gap between the sexes today is not the result of social perception. It just all comes down to female incompetence. The humor gap between the sexes is going to stay with us, whether we like it or not. So we better accept it, and we better embrace it. Because if women just try so hard to be like men, if they just start making jokes randomly and expect people to laugh at them, that will be the end of romance, the end of sex, and the end of the reproduction of the human species. And we should learn from the bad example of Iceland, because in Iceland they've been trying to dismantle another historical gap that was there for a reason, the gender pay gap. And look what happened. There were dramatic consequences. And I know this because we did a large-scale participatory research project with my research team in Iceland. So between 2006 and 2015, me and my research team, we participated in the intimate life of an average Icelandic couple in Reykjavik. So for 9 years, we stood behind the curtains of their bedroom and observed their sexual behavior. And what we found was very interesting. So, as the gender pay gap was decreased throughout the years in the country, so did the libido of the average Icelandic couple decrease. To the extent that in 2016, the average Icelandic couple had only sex once in every 2 years. Yeah, and of course, I mean, later on, the average Icelandic couple claimed that the reason for the decrease in their sexual activity was mainly due to them feeling freaked out by this bunch of scientists watching them from behind the curtain. But nevertheless, these results must be taken seriously. Because just think about the demographic and the economic consequences for Iceland if the gender pay gap continues to decrease. We should not mess with nature, or there will be dire consequences. God has created man and woman to be different, and we should embrace these differences. Thank you for your attention.